The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray.
Dave.
Lord, as we hear Job reflect on his glory days tonight, as we begin chapter 29, and how he longs to regain your favor, God, we thank you that we don't have to strive or seek to earn your favor as Christians, for in Jesus Christ we have been made righteous. We thank you for this eternal gift in his name. Amen. All right, so that kicks off chapter 29. My prayer suggests what's coming, which is that Job, in this chapter, will reflect on his glory days and long to regain God's favor, and he will uphold his integrity. So here we go. David Allen, if you'd please read chapter 29.
And Job again took up his discourse and said, "Oh, that I were as in the months of old, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone upon my head, and by his light I walked through the darkness. As I was in my autumn days, when the friendship of God was upon my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were about me, when my steps were washed with milk, and the rock poured out for me to streams of oil. When I went out to the gate of the city, when I prepared my seat in the square, the young men saw me and withdrew, and the aged rose and stood. The princes refrained from talking and laid their hand on their mouth. The voice of the nobles was hushed, and their tongue cleaved to the roof of their mouth. When the ear heard, it called me blessed, and when the eye saw, it approved, because I delivered the poor who cried, and the fatherless who had none to help him. The blessing of him who was about to perish came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. I was a father to the poor, and I searched out the cause of him who I did not know. I broke the fangs of the unrighteous and made him drop his prey from his teeth. Then I thought, I shall die in my nest, and I shall multiply my days as the sand. My roots spread out to the waters, with the dew all night on my branches. My glory fresh with me, and my bow ever new in my hand. Men listened to me and waited and kept silence for my counsel. And I spoke. After I spoke, they did not speak again, and my word dropped upon them. They waited for me as for the rain, and they opened their mouths as for the spring rain. I smiled on them when they had no confidence, and the light of my countenance they did not cast down. I chose their way and sat as a chief, and I dwelt like a king among his troops, like one who conforms mourners, or comforts mourners.
Thank you, David. So let's break this down into 3 sections. Let's go 1 through 14 initially. What is Job doing here?
He's recounting how it was before he was before Satan attacked.
It was found in the
Yeah. The things he did.
And what things did he do that would describe his life?
Sounds like he was a judge of some sort, just out of the city square.
In the ancient cities, there would be a gate, which wouldn't be the kind of gate we might imagine. It would often be a stone pillar with a little opening. And if you've been to Israel, to Dan, which is the northernmost part of the Israeli territory historically, there's an ancient archaeological dig site where there's the high place, as it's called, and there was a gate where the ancient judges would sit. And this describes just that kind of place, where people would go for justice, counsel, forgiveness. And so he was an elder at the gate, which had a lot of symbolic connotation to it.
It was giving us an idea of just what he did do. I mean, there's been all kinds of accusations against him, right? We heard that. Now you get an idea of just what he really did do. You know, who he blessed, who really looked up to him, and so on.
Okay, so his righteous deeds, he's recounted them.
Amen.
And so what are some of them? And we'll tie this into some other parts of Scripture. First of all, he was an elder because he says that the young men saw me and stepped aside. And the old men rose to their feet. So he was an elder, but he wasn't the oldest, right? And what were some of his righteous deeds in his mind?
Rescued the poor.
Help the widows.
He was a fatherless. You know, he didn't have a father.
Yeah.
Feet to the lame.
Care of the fathers.
And for those he didn't even know of, it said, "I searched out the cause of him whom I did not know." Helpless. Too far.
Verse 17 sounds like he would punish wicked people, punish the unrighteous.
Broke the fangs of the wicked and snatched the victims from their teeth.
Right, so people who were harming others, he would stop.
So he had some very different roles. He was caring for the poor and the needy, the widows and the orphans. And the book of James says in the New Testament, religion that is pure and undefiled is this, to care for orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself unstained from the world. So that's exactly what Job was doing, the way he would describe it. But even more so, Larry, to your point, he was also executioner in a way. Right? Remember the imprecatory psalm we had read last week? Remember some of those lines about vengeance and justice? Some pretty descriptive things. I broke the fangs of the wicked and snatched the victims from their teeth. So Job is, what's the word? We're thinking about how he views himself.
He's like the policeman, the judge, all kinds of things.
Well, he was an inspiration, you could say, for the community. Everyone looked up to him.
So he's very much the elder statesman in his context. Spiritually, Job is described as blameless from the beginning of this book. We've had a lot of interesting discussions along the way about what that means. As we circle back to that, what do you think that means for him in his mind? Why is he recounting these days of old, how great they were? What's his point in doing that?
I'm just trying to figure out what he did, what he might have done wrong. Trying to justify, trying to communicate with God again.
Well, I think it's like,
I think he's, I'm sorry. I think he's kind of bragging about all the good that he got, and he was connected with God. And he's talking about, in the beginning here, all the good things that, all the good fortune that he had gotten. You know, his olive trees were full of fruit, and the oil that he had, and of course, he mentions his children, and, you know, just everything, he was blessed. I think he's kind of, that's what he's talking about, and he's attributing it to God. He's kind of bragging.
And he's still offering his defense of the accusations. So he offers this as sort of the final. These are the things that are about me, about my life, about what I was doing, and so I think it's still a defense, to those who are accusing him, to say, no, that this is who I am. This is what
Kind of reminds me of when Jesus went up to the rich guy, the rich young ruler, and said, and he, rich young ruler kind of like spat off all the things that he's done, which is what Job is doing. But then Jesus said, okay, fine, but sell all you have. And then that made him sad. It's kind of like, almost seems like a same thing that Job is doing. See, Job ended up losing everything. In a sense, he didn't sell everything he had. He lost everything he had. But still, all of the stuff Job did is still not enough.
I think this is what God really wants us to a certain extent to do too. It's like reminiscing, like all these things that he's done here, he's done them through the blessing of God, and how God has blessed him. And when he's going through all these accusations, which is the same battles that we can go through sometime in our lives, that's what God really, that's where our refuge is. That's where my refuge is. When things are really going haywire, you go to the Lord, and you think of the way he has blessed you, how he's taking you through all these circumstances, you know, and it just, it lifts up your spirits, you know, and it makes you feel good, you know, about him, about your relationship. Of course, he's really longing for the relationship again, but he's our safe haven. Our God is our safe haven.
Isn't it funny that he's an elder? He recounts all the good stuff. I mean, it just seems hard to believe being a mortal and being an elder that having all this good stuff, he wouldn't recount maybe one or two things on the other side of the ledger.
Somebody once said that the good old days are a combination of having a bad memory and a vivid imagination. That's a good point. He's putting out his credentials.
Good side.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying he get a lot of bad, but
It sounds almost like he's proud. He's proud of what he did. He's prideful in the sense of, I did all the things which I did. Look at me. But we don't see yet the mercy of God which comes about it. That's probably come later on. And realize that God has a different perspective. But he himself prideful what he did. So far, I don't see any remorse on his part of it.
Well, if we're Job's friends, what we're hearing is his outward form by way of his descriptions. We can't see his heart.
No.
Yeah, he's going too far with his description. He's not reaching just for the Lord in that relationship. He's still reaching for how good and easy it was, his stature in the community. You know, he's just not reaching for that simple, you know, love of the master. He's going into all his stuff.
And even if he did have, in a sense, somewhat pure motives in serving the Lord, which he perhaps did, and I see, Jimmy, you're making that point, that he did love the Lord in his way and served him. There's still that heart issue, which this doesn't address. Which is to say that our good deeds wouldn't be enough to be right with God.
That's true. That's true.
So if we go to verse 18 through 20, as the second section within this chapter, I thought, I will die in my own house, my days as numerous as the grains of sand. My roots will reach to the water, and the dew will lie all night on my branches. My glory will remain fresh in me, the bow ever new in my hands. What is he saying there?
It's like he deserves his high status. He's such a cool guy.
Who needs the message, Larry, when we got that translation? I love that. That's exactly right. He's basically saying that his behavior would warrant him
Glory.
a long, great, good life.
Can't do anything wrong.
Have we ever felt that way? Let's talk about ourselves a bit here in this context. Do we look back and say, you know, things were a lot better back then, things were going great, I was doing this right? Or shouldn't things be better now because of things that were going well for me then? How do we face these things?
Oh, I'd never go back. I don't know, sometimes, for me anyway, my life, it's like totally the opposite. And not to say that, you know, my younger life was bad, I have no reason to want to relive it.
Amen.
My-
Me too, feel the same way.
I think too, as we live longer and I look back at it as we were referencing what we did earlier and what was good or bad, was good or this, what was good or foul, the more we realize the real goodness that we look forward to is based upon the fact that what we thought in the past was good, and we're trying to be honest about it, then there was some way that either we changed some of that goodness, or the circumstances of living changed it, and seems to be ultimately making things better than they were before in that area of life. We learn more and more as we live about what is really good, and what is better, and what is best, and how we can improve on what we thought was good by continuing to always look for what about the goodness is very good, what about the goodness needs some refinement of its own. And if we can give it to it, and see what the effect is, you'll see how it could be better. We will make it better, we'll be better. That's the constant growing of God's kingdom. He's growing us, always. So this improvement of our goodness towards His perfect.
Thanks, John. We've heard this before. Man proposes, God disposes. So things aren't working out the way Job thought they should. As we go through the third part of this section, chapter 29, men listened to me expectantly, waited in silence for my counsel. After I had spoken, they spoke no more. My words fell gently on their ears. They waited for me as for showers, and drank in my words as the spring rain. When I smiled at them, they scarcely believed it. The light of my face was precious to them. I chose the way for them and sat as their chief. I dwelt as a king among his troops. I was like one who comforts mourners. So, what kind of posture is this, do you think?
You know, it sounds like he's bragging, right?
Very prideful.
He's definitely full of himself.
Now, we've seen Job take different positions. He gets very humble and
Right.
down, and then he throws himself back up. There's this back and forth with his friends. We see his humanity, don't we? His attempt to justify himself.
Well, I guess he's figuring God isn't watching, right? So he can brag. I don't know, maybe he thinks that it would cause God to interact, maybe, or something like that. I don't know, you know.
Would it be fair to say he's advocating for himself?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
He has confidence now, and he's experienced, and the wisdom of the elders comes from experience, from what they see, and what they, I guess, evaluate from what they see and what they experience, and that makes him an elder, and people are now respecting him because he is an elder, as it said, and so now he feels really good about himself, and he has confidence, and basically, I think that's what he's saying.
So he's gone from somebody who would watch people hang on his every word as he would tell it, to where his friends are basically,
Right.
it's been totally reversed. He's been totally humble.
So,
Almost totally humble.
if you read just the first of the next chapter, you know, this is talking about how he was, things were.
Right.
And now, they mock me, is the next words. So this is all fallen away, and he doesn't understand it. He's trying to understand why his situation has changed so drastically.
Then he's looking at it from two different dimensions. The first part of this was really his deeds. This part of this is so-called station, if you will, like his position, that he had some stroke in society. So, I mean, it's just another kind of defense, dimension of his defense.
What's interesting for me about 21 through 25 is that I can think of at least one person in my life who I would say that I looked up to them in a way that, he describes these persons looking up to him. But the interesting thing is that person I'm thinking of would never see themselves that way. They would never make that kind of proclamation about themselves, and I think that's just sort of interesting. So that there's the one person I'm thinking of that would have had a humbleness of heart, and I know they would. I wouldn't say they would be surprised if I told them this, but they weren't looking for it. They weren't banking on it. It wasn't part of their MO to look at themselves that way. So.
Oh my God, the right hand of the Father.
Why do you think everybody shows up early, Roger?
Now we're in trouble.
Bill, that's a great point. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's about identity, right?
Yeah.
Peter?
Now, the other thing is, if, let's say, I would be here among all of you, would recite all those things, even if they are true, how would you look at it by saying those things? You probably would all say, the cracks a lot. Yeah? And he thinks he's the greatest in the world. That comes to me like, well, here I am. I was a big man. So everybody bowed down to me. But what he's basically saying, I'm more than anybody else.
No, I think what he's saying is just trying to defend himself like he's in court. If we were attacking you, saying that you're no good, you did something wrong, and then you stood up and said this, you're defending yourself in a sense. I think he's unhumbly defending himself for what he's done.
Does not sound to me humble.
No, I said unhumble. He's unhumbly defending himself, but he's still putting up a defense. Right now he's talking to his friends, and his friends have attacked him multiple times, so he's defending himself. Granted, he's not humble about it, but he is defending himself.
Well, if someone says a falsehood enough times, it then becomes a truth, doesn't it? Unless you counteract it. He's not going to let them get away with that.
And I suppose he could have went silently and not said anything and just accepted it, but I don't believe that we would have learned anything from him, from that,
And neither are
about
his,
ourselves and him.
and like his three friends have something to learn out of this also.
I'm thinking through the last 20 chapters or so, his friends have been throwing everything at the wall, thinking, wondering what will stick. Nothing is stuck. This guy's on took one. He doesn't have any faults. He's just one joke. He really is an excellent person.
He's a good defense attorney, He's stating all the things that he's done, all the people that he's helped, and all the great things that he's done in his benefit.
I guess it's funny though when he's going recounting all these things. His friends and stuff, they live in the same area, so they must know where. No, I mean they must know all the deeds that he's done in the past. They must also know about his, stature or whatever. Yet they still, were coming down on him, basically. I mean, because it's not like he moved to a brand new area and said, "Oh, this is my past life." I mean, these guys.
But they were from far away.
I thought they were his friends, weren't they?
They are his friends, but sort of.
Well, this is like.
But we need to read chapter 30 now, because it says, but it's not the whole picture.
Yeah, there will be a transition
Yeah.
back to
Yeah.
doom and gloom. Yes, we'll get there. And Larry, I'll have you read 30, okay? Okay.
You know, this is, I like this, this is the first, well, prior to this is all condemnation. That's all that you're hearing. Well, I think we need to know something about his life also. So this is letting us know what he actually did do. Because it's just very easy to condemn somebody, and everybody just jumps on the bandwagon.
Well, what we do is certainly get a sense of his anguish.
Yeah.
And because this is Hebrew poetry, or even pre-Hebraic, it's very interesting imagery. I mean, it's poetic.
Like in verse 5, where it says, "The mighty is yet with me, and my children are all around me." I mean, he's hurt very deeply. He's lost an awful lot. He might be talking about some materialistic things, but he's talking about his family too that he's lost.
And his relationship with God, I think that's the biggest thing that he's lost. He thinks he's lost. Oh, I long for the days when I was in my prime, when God's intimate friendship blessed my house.
So it sounds like though he was longing for the days of the blessings, not longing for the days of God. Do we want God, or do we want just his blessings?
Oh, he said God's intimate friendship blessed my house. It didn't say the things blessed. It's God's intimate friendship blessed his house.
God's intimate friendship blessed his house. Do I only want a friendship with God, or is God only a friend of mine when I am blessed? Is God not a friend of mine even when I'm not blessed?
I don't think that comes into it. I think he's just recounting the time that when God was in his house. So his friendship was there. And that's not there anymore. Whether it was good or bad or...
I need some clarity about the word parable. Because my King James Version in the first verse of chapter 29 said, "Moreover, Job continued his parable and said," and then what follows. And I'm curious about why that word parable is used in his explanation that follows. It's not like, it's almost,
That's the King James, right?
yeah.
The King James is very liberal in borrowing the word parable to describe different kinds of discourses or discussions. It doesn't always refer to the parable the way Jesus referred to a parable, which is a story within a story. What are some other translations you all have instead of parable?
Oh, okay.
Speaking again. That's a good point to bring that up. Again, it goes back to translation. We saw last week that some translations sound almost entirely different from others
Yeah.
in some of this scripture.
Some of the ones.
I think sometimes the Hebrew has it means take it away.
Peter, you mentioned chapter 30, and Larry, if you please read chapter 30 for us. It's fairly long, and there are two sections. The first half is where Job rehearses his present misery, so there's this transition that Harlan was pointing to. And the second half will be where Job describes his despair before God. So we've heard this before, but it will be in new poetic expressions.
Job chapter 30. And now they mock me, men younger than I, whose fathers I would have disdained to put with my sheepdogs. Of what use is the strength of their hands to me, since their vigor had gone from them? Haggard from want and hunger, they roamed the parched land and desolate wastelands at night. In the brush they gathered salt herbs, and their food was the root of the broom tree. They were banished from their fellow men, shouted at as if they were thieves. They were forced to live in the dry stream beds, along the rocks and in holes in the ground. They brayed among the bushes and huddled in the undergrowth. A base and nameless brood, they were driven out of the land. And now their sons mock me in song. I have become a byword among them. They detest me and keep their distance. They do not hesitate to spit in my face. Now that God has unstrung my bow and afflicted me, they throw off restraint in my presence. My right, the tribe attacks. They lay snares for my feet. They build their siege ramps against me. They break up my road. They succeed in destroying me without anyone's helping them. They advance as though through a gaping breach. Amid the ruins they come rolling in. Terrors overwhelm me. My dignity is driven away as by the wind. My safety vanishes like a cloud. And now my life ebbs away. Days of suffering grip me. Night pierces my bones. My gnawing pains never rest. In his great power, God becomes like clothing to me. He binds me like the neck of my garment. He throws me into the mud. I am reduced to dust and ashes. I cry out to you, O God, but you do not answer. I stand up, but you merely look at me. You turn on me ruthlessly. In the might of your hand, you attack me. You snatch me up and drive me before the wind. You toss me about in the storm. I know you will bring me down to death, to the place appointed for all the living. Surely no one lays his hand on a broken man when he cries for help in his distress. Have I not wept for those in trouble? Has not my soul grieved for the poor? Yet when I hoped for good, evil came. When I looked for light, then came darkness. The churning inside me never stops. Days of suffering confront me. I go about blackened, but not by the sun. I stand up in the assembly and cry for help. I have become a brother of jackals, a companion of owls. My skin grows black and peels. My body burns with fever. My harp is tuned to mourning, and my flute to the sound of wailing.
Thank you, Larry.
Boy,
It's a lot like the psalm we listened to on Good Friday, Psalm 22. We'll get to that. Let's go through this. Again, the imagery is very powerful. My skin turns black and feels like it's right there, isn't it? Just the misery. Okay. What are some other things that jumped out at you?
It sounds like there was a group of people that were completely disdained by others. Like they were outcasts, or people that were forced to live in dry stream beds and live in the bushes. And that these people now, these people that nobody likes, are mocking Job, who was once an elder of the gate.
So he's become an outcast.
Yes.
it'd be also possible that some of these very people that he himself helped, and they're not reciprocating. It's like when you're on top of the mountain, everybody's your friend, right? When you come down, it's not that way anymore.
And now their sons mock me in song. I've become a byword among them. One verse of one of the Psalms says, the drunkards make up songs about me. And at all points, as Christians we see this, at all points to Jesus, the suffering servant described in Isaiah 53. But one example is Psalm 22, which he uttered from the cross. Here's just a few of the verses. See if you can connect it to what we just heard from chapter 3 of Job. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by men and despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. I can count on my bones. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing. The thing about Psalm 22 is that it doesn't end on such a downward note. It actually rises and ends with faith. But we're often treated just to that first verse. My God, why have you forsaken me? Which Christ cried out from the cross. So back to Job. He's a suffering servant in his own way, long before the Christ. So the recollection of glory days is now transferred to a thorough description of his present misery.
Going back into 29, where where it reels off all of these things, is how he delivered the poor, the fatherless, so on and so forth. I mean, that definitely speaks of Christ too. And that should now, the same way they turned on him is what's happening to Job.
Yeah, father to the fatherless. That's one of the great promises that God gives
Amen.
the lost. So there's a psalm, speaking of Psalm 137. I'd like Bob to read verses 1 through 4 for us. This is a lament by the Jewish people over the 6th century BC captivity by the Babylonians. You may know this psalm. It's simply a reflection of somewhat of what Job is going through, which is, we had it so amazingly, and now things are so bad.
By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. There on the poplars we hung our harps. For there our captors asked us for songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." How can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land?
Thank you. That's very moving in itself.
I think though, what's interesting about this chapter though, he's still focused on stuff that's happening here on earth. Because he's talking about these other people mocking him. And, they were the dregs or whatever type of thing. So it's all about that in relationship on that as opposed to maybe in relationship with God, I mean, you think about stuff like I was thinking when I first heard that, I was thinking like stuff like the Holocaust, okay? A lot of Jewish people didn't do anything. It just happened to be society or whatever kind of worked up things against them. It's almost like what's happened here.
18 and 19 kind of remind me of creation. The great power of God becomes like clothing to me. He binds me like the neck of my garment. He throws me into the mud, and I am reduced to dust and ashes. It's almost like a rebirth. He's recreating him out of dust, which is what he created us out of. And he clothed us after our sin. And it's kind of maybe he's getting it, that he has sinned and he needs God to clothe him, and he needs that resurrected life because.
What's interesting about that is in the previous chapter, verse 14, chapter 29, he says, "I put on righteousness as my clothing, justice was my robe and my turban." So it's like in the previous chapter, he thinks, I had my righteousness like clothing. And now he finds himself exactly like the creation story where it's all going in reverse.
Right.
I think it just figured it must be when it says, "With great force my garment is disfigured from disease," whatever has affected him.
Well, if I'm correct in what I'm saying in a simplified way, it's sort of like saying, previously I believed in certain ways, things, but I put on a covering of righteousness to certain ideas I had, certain ways I had, because it did seem there's some better ways to me. But the goal is for that righteousness to eventually, the best of the righteousness is to become so righteous to us that we eventually, that righteousness becomes part of our real righteousness, and not something we just have to adapt. But in place, as we adapt a better righteousness than we had before, that righteousness which we had before with some of the badness is now gone. So we have more of the better and less of the worse. It's going.
Sounds like you're describing what we call sanctification, where the righteousness of Christ imputed to us results in our becoming as we are regarded, which is a lifelong process, where we're never perfect, but we move toward Christian perfection through the righteousness of Christ, right?
Yeah, Ellen says, well, just how close do you want to get to perfection? What was God going to say? You consider my servant Jim? I said, no, thank you. You know, maybe I'd be a little on the other side. I don't need to go through this.
Is kind of interesting, where it says, my inward parts are in turmoil and are never still. So it's obviously, he still didn't completely come to grips with everything. But it's reflecting.
Now, what you're saying has an interesting thought in it. Very interesting. But just believing that I could say at any particular time, my inward thoughts are still in turmoil. Means that I've been making changes. And I'm happy I made some of those changes. But I'm still feeling that many of my inward thoughts still have some turmoil in it. And you know, if I do that long enough, and now I'll be doing that really as long as I live on this earth, I will always realize I am in turmoil over where I was, but not as much turmoil as I was before. So that's like saying the door is opening to you, Joe. You don't know what the final plan is going to be, but you keep opening it with the right spirit of the God of the Lord, it will continue to open in the right direction for you. That's what conscience is all about.
I believe we have time for one more chapter tonight. Chapter 31, where Job reaffirms his innocence once again. And what's of particular interest here, especially after the comments right about creation, is he invokes Adam. So he takes us back, in a sense, to creation itself. So let's go through this and have some fun with it.
I have made a covenant with my eyes. How then could I look upon a virgin? What would be my portion from God above, and my heritage from the Almighty on high? Does not calamity befall the unrighteous, and disaster the workers of iniquity? Does he not see my ways and number all my steps? I have walked with falsehood, and my foot has hurried to deceit. Let me be weighed in a just balance, and let God know my iniquity. If my step has turned aside from the way, and my heart has followed my eyes, and if any spot has clung to my hands, then let me sow and another eat, and let what grows for me be rooted out. If my heart has been enticed by a woman, and I have lain in wait at my neighbor's door, then let my wife grind for another, and let other men kneel over her. For that would be a heinous crime, and would be a criminal offense. For that would be a fire consuming down to Abaddon, and it would burn to the root of my harvest. I have rejected the cause of my male or female slaves. When they brought a complaint against me, what then shall I do when God rises up? When he makes inquiry, what shall I answer him? Did not he who made me in a womb make them? And did not one fashion us in the womb? I have withheld anything that is poor desired, or have caused his eyes of the widow to fail, or have eaten my morsel alone, and the orphan has not eaten from it. For from my youth I reared the orphan like a father, and from my mother's womb I guided the widow. If I have seen anyone perish for lack of clothing, or a poor person without covering, whose loins have not blessed me, and who have not worn with the fleece of my sheep. If I've raised my hand against the orphan, because I saw I had supporters at the gate, then let my shoulder blade fall from my shoulder, and let my arm be broken from its socket. For I was in terror of calamity from God, and I could not efface this majesty. If I have made gold my trust, or called my gold my confidence, if I have rejoiced because my wealth was great, or because my hand had gotten much, if I had looked at the sun when it shone, or the moon moving in splendor, and my heart has been secretly enticed, and my mouth has kissed my hand, this also would be an iniquity to be punished by the judges. For I should have been false to God above. If I have rejoiced at the ruin of those who hated me, or exulted when evil overtook them, I have not let my mouth sin by asking for their lives with a curse. If those of my tent ever said, "Oh, that we might be sated with his flesh," the stranger has not lodged in the street. I have opened my doors to the traveler. If I have concealed my transgressions as others do, by hiding my iniquity in my bosom, because I stood in great fear of the multitude, and the contempt of families terrified me, so that I kept silence and I did not go out of the doors. Oh, that I had one to hear me. Here is my signature, let the Almighty answer me. Oh, that I had an indictment written by my adversary. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder. I would bind it on me like a crown. I would give him an account of all my steps. Like a prince, I would approach him. If my land has cried out against me, and its furrows have wept together, if I have eaten its yield without payment, and caused the death of its owners, let thorns grow instead of wheat, and foul weeds instead of barley. The words of Job are ended.
Now, we didn't hear the word Adam, did we? Where's the King James Version?
Yep.
King James? What does verse 33 say in the King James?
If I covered my transgressions as Adam by hiding my iniquity in my bosom.
Perfect, thank you. Now, how about that? His reference is Adam in the King James Version. The NIV, you read from the NIV? It doesn't say Adam.
Yeah.
So there's the translation difficulty right there.
Yeah.
And how critical that is. You could go right over and miss it. But even in the NIV, you can see what it means. If I have concealed my sin as men do. So where does that take us back to? What part of the Bible? Paul, right in Genesis. And I'll read a quick commentary.
33.
This is by Henry M. Morris, PhD, biblical commentator, based upon the following verse, verse 33. If I covered my transgressions as Adam by hiding mine iniquity in my bosom. The patriarch Job lived long before Moses and the writing of the Pentateuch, yet he knew about Adam and his fall, and likewise about God's curse on the world because of Adam's sin. And Peter, this goes back to a question you had a few weeks ago. Evidently, Job still had access to the records of primeval history, either by verbal tradition from his ancestors or perhaps through actual written records of the ancient patriarchs handed down from Adam to Moses. There are also a number of references in Job to man's original creation. After speaking first of the beasts, the fowls of the air, and the fishes of the sea, Job asks, "Who knoweth not in all these that the hand of the Lord hath wrought this? In whose hand is the soul of every living thing, and the breath of all mankind?" That was Job 12. Note also Elihu's testimony from Job 33, verse 4. "The Spirit of God hath made me, and the breath of the Almighty hath given me life." So we'll get to that.
Could you read the verse that has Adam in it, so I can hear how it reads?
Oh, okay. If I have concealed my sin as Adam has,
Okay, if I can say
as Adam did.
there, and
then it changes to that, or as Adam did.
Thank you.
So it wasn't there, they just...
Okay, thank you. Interesting. And now let's go to the deeper layer. What is Job saying about this ancient action in history and his role as one who's innocent?
Because he doesn't act, doesn't have the tendency to sin.
Think about that. Our beloved Job, the innocent one, is saying essentially that he did not do it after.
Amen.
But is that true? Did he didn't conceal his sin from God. He doesn't know what he did.
Well, good question. Is it true? What do you all think?
I think he probably sinned.
Oh, I'm sure he sinned.
Said he was a holy man. And how was he's mentioned all these things that if he would have done them, then they would be justified in how they're treating him. And he hasn't. He has not done it.
Didn't do anything wrong.
He didn't do anything.
Well, yeah, in his picture, but we've also talked about he's judged others and done a bunch of things. And earlier on in some of the readings, we had kind of talked about, maybe God is allowing all this, or during all of this, is also taking Job deeper to really understand. It's not about, oh, you're a good guy, you get good stuff. It's about come to me and, accept and live the life I give you and walk you through.
I just want to go back to 29:20. How can you justify my glory will not fade? I mean, come on.
Well, what does Jesus say? In the book of John, Father, I've given them the glory that you have given me.
Exactly.
Amen.
And just like Romans yesterday, after he predestined us, we will be glorified.
Amen.
We will be glorified through Christ, not through. I'm not going to glorify myself. Job is saying, "My glory will not fade." My. That's come on.
I wash my hands.
Yeah, right.
Isaiah says,
I rest my case.
on behalf of God, I share my glory with no other. And then Jesus comes and shares the glory of God with us. So what a progression.
Amen.
The glory is a powerful thing. The Hebrew word for glory means heaviness. So it's like crushing, but at the same time liberating. The glory cloud, right? So yeah, Job, that's quite a line.
Scary.
I mean, to me, I kind of took it a little different. I look at this as almost him kind of getting an epiphany. Almost to the point that he says, if I have concealed my transgressions as others do, it's almost like maybe he never thought about that, and now that he's thinking maybe he has done it. So I took it when read it that it's almost like he's having an epiphany that maybe he has done something.
Okay, so he's thinking, well, maybe I did do this.
Right.
It's possible.
It's possible. Maybe that's not the way. But
Now, St. Augustine came along and created what we call the doctrine of original sin, which just goes back to the biblical account of Adam's fall, that everyone was tainted after that, which is found throughout the New Testament. It would be fair to say that Job does not buy into the later Augustinian definition of original sin. Right? That it happened with Adam, but he may not have done that. Or maybe he has. You might think about that.
Well, wasn't it earlier in the book that he said he was sin from the beginning? When he was born? If I seem to remember correctly. I don't know exactly where it was, but that he was born a sinner from his mother's womb.
That is Psalm 51. I was a sinner from my mother's womb. That was David's lament.
Oh, was it? Okay.
It could be something similar in the beginning of Job. I can't remember exactly.
Well, in 3:3, may the day of my birth perish, and the night that said, "Oh boy, a boy is conceived," that day may turn. It doesn't really say anything about him being blameless or a sinner.
The verses that follow are interesting. Oh, that I had someone to hear me. I sign now my defense. Let the Almighty answer me. Let my accuser put his indictment in writing. Surely I would wear it on my shoulder. I would put it on like a crown. I would give him an account of my every step. Like a prince, I would approach him. So again, if Job's his own advocate, does he have what it takes to come out clean?
Give him a little rope. I think he's hanging himself.
He needs a good lawyer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thinks he is.
He thinks he is.
He needs another.
Right, just like he thinks he's not a sinner. He thinks thinks he can
Now remember
stand
earlier
up
on,
to
he
the
said,
Lord.
I need an advocate. Oh, that I would have an advocate.
But he doesn't know, he doesn't know what the indictment is. He doesn't realize, he doesn't understand that he's done anything wrong. And so he said, you know, if you tell me what I did wrong, then maybe I'll shape up.
Again, we have the advantage of being able to peer
And the
behind
Lord
the curtain
says, "Thank you,
and see what's happening. He doesn't.
And you can see the respect he has for God. Before I was in terrible calamity from God, I could not have faced his majesty. You know, it just, I thought it speaks of his ongoing relationship he did have with God, meeting with God, just like Adam met with God in the garden, right, in the cool of the day. I feel he really walked with God.
I think this line's great. If I have eaten its yield without payment. It's just like,
Well, the Ten Commandments loom large in this chapter, don't they? Covetousness,
right.
adultery. There's the possibility of it, right? If I've looked upon a virgin,
Yeah,
my
right.
version says,
Right.
not to look lustfully at a girl. Stealing, which is what you just referenced, right? False witness.
Yeah, so it's kind of like he's going through the Ten Commandments and kind of checking them off. Did I do this one? Did I?
So a lot of the Pentateuch is evident even in this oral tradition. Pentateuch, the first God books. We'll talk after this.
This book was written before the book of Moses, though, right?
So it was written before the Pentateuch was put down in writing.
Okay.
A lot of this was oral tradition even before this was written.
So, maybe it's in Kings, where one of the kings is put off for 7 seasons or units or whatever, till he bows down and says, God, you're everything. You're it. You're in control. You've got it. That's almost like looking at this and saying, that's just what you should do. Just get it. Like the apostles walked around some of the times like they'd been spending time with Jesus and still didn't get it. It's the same thing. Going through all this, just get on your knees and look to me. That's simple. It's just not getting it.
Yeah, I also looks the way he's speaking, like in verse 13 and 15, that he definitely, respects other people. He does not himself think that he is above them. So
Who, Job? No, that's not true. He says, when I was somebody, they wouldn't spit at me. Now that, I'm nobody, now they do spit at me.
Well, he's saying, yeah, if I've rejected,
Well, he's all over the place.
I've rejected the cause of my manservant, my maidservant, and it comes down to, yeah, but did not he make me in the womb as he made him? So it's kind of showing that he's not really putting himself in those verses anyway above anyone.
It is interesting.
Let's hear from Romans. Vito, will you read Romans 5:12-18, which will wrap this up? And by the way, chapter 31 ends, the words of Job are ended. That's a good stopping point for us because Elihu will begin the next chapter. And Vito, if you just wrap it up with the New Testament declaration of truth.
Death through Adam, life through Christ. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all men, because all sinned. For before the law was given, sin was in the world. But sin is not taken into account when there is no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from time of Adam to the time of Moses, even over those who did not sin by breaking a commandment, as did Adam, who was a pattern of the one to come. But the gift is not like a trespass. For if the many died by the trespass of the one man, how much more did God's grace and the gift that came by the grace of the one man, Jesus Christ, overflow to the many? Again, the gift of God is not like the result of one man's sin. The judgment followed one sin and brought condemnation, but the gift followed many trespasses and brought justification. For if by the trespass of one man death reigned through that one man, how much more will those who receive God's abundant provision of grace and of the gift of righteousness reign in life through the one man, Jesus Christ.
Let us pray. Lord, we need your grace, and we have your grace, and we thank you for your grace through our Lord Jesus Christ. In these weeks ahead, may you continue to knit us together as your fellowship of believers, seeking you above all else by your grace. In Jesus' name we